Welcome to Five Live Cricket. Over the next hour, we'll work out exactly what England are going to do without Jack Leach, hear from David Warner on his legacy, and look ahead to the World Test Championship as well. With us for the next hour, former England captain Alistair Cook and cricket journalist Mel Farrell. Evening to you both.
Evening.
Oh, that's a strong. I tell you what, Mel, that's a strong start. Could just be you and me.
Oh dear. I mean, I tell you what, he was a lot more convincing opening the batting for England than he was to the opening to this show. With all due respect.
Well, I was told that I was listening to TMS during the England test against Ireland, and I knew his voice was a bit croaky through celebrating Luton's promotion, but I wasn't expecting it to be that bad at the start. We'll get him back at some point. Look, we'll hear from David Warner a little bit later on. But isn't it strange how quickly confidence, views on a series can change just with one injury? And I feel like that has happened today with the Jack Leach news, don't you?
Yeah, look, it has. I've been quite interested by reactions. I know when I put something out, when I saw the news about what a shame it was, first of all, for Jack personally, but also just a blow for England, especially given the amount they've invested in him with Jeetan Patel in there as the spin bowling coach. It just felt like it was a big blow. I actually think spinners are often perhaps one of the most underrated, if not the most underrated player in teams, apart from when you're playing in the subcontinent, because there are a lot of people responding to me saying, "Oh, is it that big a loss? They could play four seamers, they could do this, do that." It's not that simple, and playing four seamers is always a big risk. There's a reason that teams very rarely do it, even in very seam-friendly conditions, because it can really, knacker your fast bowlers early on in a series and have a big impact that way as well. But has really thrown up a quandary for England. And we've seen, apparently, they have reportedly reached out to Moeen Ali, and Moeen Ali is considering it, which George Dobell has been reporting for the cricketer, and he knows Moeen Ali very well. Then you have some largely untried, apart from a couple of tests, some young players. All of those options, I think, have their risks in bringing someone like Rehan Ahmed or Will Jackson. Liam Dawson's there as well. There doesn't seem to be a huge amount of momentum behind him. It's really difficult, because that is the role that you can kind of almost set and forget. All right, that's what they do.
Should we try again? Let's see if he's there this time. Evening, Alistair.
Good evening. Please tell me this works.
Yeah, that did work. I mean, as starts go, that was quite possibly the worst, I think, in my whole time of doing this.
Cheers, chappers. I've been panicking all day about my internet in my house, and been having phone calls with engineers. Are you sure it's going to work? You sure it's going to work? And all afternoon, apparently it's worked. And then the first word I come out, and then I hear nothing back, and I'm like, oh God, we're back.
We were talking to Mel, obviously, about Jack Leach there, and the first thing I was saying, Mel pointed out what a shame it is for the player, and we'll do that in just a second, but how quickly it feels like a mood can change with one piece of news. And, I opened an app and saw that today, and it was just like, oh, no.
Absolutely. And what is so, I suppose, strange about it is a year ago, everybody was questioning Jack Leach's place in the side and saying, what's he doing in there? Why England keep backing him? And then over the last year, his relationship with Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum have just seen this guy flourish, really believe that he belongs at international cricket, which I think when you play it is is probably most of the challenge. But this news just seems to be a bit unsettling. They're so used now to Jack Leach playing in this side. They're so used to his role. Yes, sometimes he goes for runs because Ben Stokes has really attacking fields. Ben Stokes really likes using him in different methods. You saw in the Ireland game, he really teased the Irish players. He really, gave them he loves almost going fishing with Jack Leach, like leaving the leg side, go on then, if you want to sweep him, sweep him. And Sterling, for example, a good sweeper, slog sweep of the ball, who loves being aggressive. After two or three balls, he couldn't resist the short boundary, played 2 sweep shots, and the third shot he got out. So I think Stokesy will really miss him because he's got that relationship with Jack Leach, and also the whole side are just so used to him being in the side. He's obviously played every single minute since Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum have taken over, and certainly as a captain, when you've got that familiarity with a player, and the side just felt settled with him in. So that's where England will just feel a bit uneasy to start with. Which way they go is a great question.
Because it may be, and Mel, you went through some of the candidates there, but it could just be a bit like the old days, I suppose, a little bit like horses for courses here, depending on not only what they want from their attack, but what they might want from their spinner in an attack. Because the ones that you've mentioned are all different in their but both by what kind of spin they might bowl, but also they're different in their own ways as well.
Well, yeah, and I mean that's why I say whichever way they go, it's going to be fascinating to me as well. And they've obviously got Joe Root there as an option at times for spinning as well, but I can't imagine them. People suggesting that they just play seamers in that attack with Joe Root. You don't want Joe Root bowling 40, 50 overs in a test match either. And then you saw what happened in Australia when England didn't play a spinner in Adelaide and Joe Root was injured and Ollie Robinson ended up bowling off spin. Yeah. So these are all the things that can happen. If Moeen Ali does come back and play, just from a story perspective, it's a heck of a story. He hasn't played first-class cricket in, I think, 18 months. To see him come back in that, I know there'd probably be people who would think that that's a little bit unfair. He's 35 now. But anybody who says, well, England have to look for the future, I don't think there is any looking to the future when there's an Ashes series to be won.
I also, Mel, I'm not sure that this regime look further than just the next game, actually. No, but I mean that in a positive way.
Well, it's true. And look, this has been thrust upon them now. And the fact that they've reached out to Moeen Ali and he's considering it, that in itself suggests that is a very, very serious option. He doesn't have the best record against Australia, but I think no matter who goes in and plays there, Australia are very aggressive towards spinners, whether it's Mo, whether it's any of the others. I think Australia will see this as an opportunity, as they have done with Jack Leach, as they did to him in Brisbane in Australia in the last series. They'll try to take down whoever England put up there. But as Alistair said, Ben Stokes, the way he used Jack Leach, he's not afraid of that. There's not that same sense that a spinner, can only go at 3 and over, and if they don't, then it's a failure.
But depending on Stokes' fitness, Michael Vaughan was talking to me on Saturday, Alistair, about whether if you've only got 4 bowlers, you're going to need your spinner sometimes just to hold up an end.
Absolutely. And so if Ben Stokes can't bowl, you probably would rule out Jacks. Will Jacks, for example, just because he's not a holding spinner. He doesn't bowl a huge amount of overs for Surrey. What he does is spin the ball hard. He's a very attacking option. And if you've only got 3 front lines seamers, and then you've got not a part-time spinner, but almost a bit like when Moeen started for England under us. He was a batsman who could bowl. So, a little bit. And he grew into his bowling. The like for like is Liam Dawson. That is the absolutely... He could do exactly the same as Jack Leach. He's a better batsman than Jack Leach. But it's the conservative option. It's the bloke can hold an end up, won't let anyone down. His bowling has got a lot better over the last few years. But that just seems very unlike Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum to take the safe and I wouldn't say easy option, but the conservative option. So If I was probably big in England, I'd probably go for Dawson for that role, because does exactly the same as Jack Leach. Left arm, everything's the same, just a slightly different personnel, and that breeds a bit of familiarity. But I think England will take the more aggressive option. I mean, they've tried to get Mo in. Moeen's it's a tough one for Mo, because he won't want to let Ben Stokes down, or he's really close with him. But it's a big ask when you know what Test cricket and certainly an Ashes series can do to you mentally. You've got to really want to be out there in the battle. You've got to really want to, A, bat in sometimes those tough situations. B, under the pump as a ball. You've got to want that battle. And obviously, the last few years he kind of felt like he said he'd done his time in Test cricket. So whether a bit of time away has changed that, but it's easy saying yes, over a phone call thing. But actually, when the pressure gets on, do you really want to be there? So I can't. I mean, I struggle to read Ben Stokes at the best times, and certainly as a captain. So what they're going to do now, I don't really know. But what they have, every selection call they have made so far, they've made good ones.
But that's, I think, one of the reasons that this Ashes series is so fascinating and so exciting. And I'm more excited about it than any other Ashes series that I think I've watched, let alone cover.
Wow.
Is that you just don't know what they're going to do. It's that what Alistair says about the conservative option, but then what's the Ben Stokes, Brendan McCullum option, and that added element to it is just one of the things that makes it so intriguing with all these different narratives.
Surely they are allowed to take the odd conservative option. I mean, by taking one conservative option doesn't automatically make them a I mean, there are so many other examples of them not being a conservative team that just by bringing Liam Dawson in doesn't change philosophy or dynamic. I don't think
it does. I mean, I think they're not making decisions because it's conservative or not conservative. Yeah. That's not the driving force behind those decisions. They're doing what they think. That the whole philosophy behind the so-called Bazball is, how do we win this game? How do we take wickets in this spell or in this over? How do we score enough runs to take the game away? It's all based on how do we win this game. And I think that same philosophy is going to underline the selection, in which selection is actually going to be a key factor perhaps in winning the Ashes.
What would you do, Alistair?
Yeah, I would go Liam Dawson, just because he's a really combative cricketer, loves getting stuck in. He won't be overruled by the Ashes or the occasion. He's really experienced, so I would go with him. Certainly to start at Edgbaston. But what I would do, I would definitely make sure there's a bit of green, if I can. We'll get a bit of green grass in that wicket. Play to England's strengths. Australia, for all their world-class players and batsmen, when the ball moves, they're not as good as they are when the ball doesn't move. I know that's an obvious thing, and every player will be like that. But their batting in particular, when it moved in 2015, 3 of the pitches out of the 5 moved. We won 3 games. The other 2, which was flat at the Oval and Lords, they hammered us. So I would go that route.
Do you think not having, which is one of the things I read today, do you think by not having Jack Leach, it changes what kind of pitches they want?
I think so. I think so, because as I said, I don't think you can now go. I think Ben Stokes would have gone if his knee's not great, and there's so much uncertainty as with knees. He was quite comfortable, I think, in going 3 seamers and Jack Leach with the odd overs of Joe Root. I think he was very comfortable with that. I think he used the Island game as a not experiment, but that this is what could happen. I'm pretty sure, we're not privy to any of those conversations, but I'm pretty sure he was so decisive and clear that that's what he was doing. And I think he's quite happy in his own mind to play on flat wickets, because he believes that we're going 3-1, because he can't see how Australia can stop England scoring big runs on those wickets. That's his message, and he believes it will give his middle order the best opportunity to showcase their skills and push them forward like they have done at every opportunity they can in the last 12 months or so. So I think it will change that.
What you would say on the experience, Mel, and talking about Liam Dawson being the most experienced, is that experience doesn't necessarily seem to matter for this England team. And I was listening to Stuart Broad on Sky this afternoon, and he was talking about Josh Tongue at Lords and the 5 wickets in the second innings against Ireland, and saying he's just the most recent in a fairly longish line of people who've come in to this Test side and have managed to perform straight away. And that is a credit to the individual, but also it's a credit to the squad and the environment, and that nobody comes in overawed and they feel that they're able to hit the ground running.
Yeah, and it was interesting because I asked Ben Stokes about Josh Tongue in the press conference, and he said, he only met him at the start of the week, which was quite extraordinary, really. And even he said himself, I think, that when it came to the second innings, and he had a word with him, and he just kept it a lot simpler. But his message in just doing what you do and not overcomplicating things for him, that's obviously key to how Ben Stokes wants to run the side now that he's in charge. And Josh Tongue bowled better in the second innings than he did in his first innings. He looked more comfortable, and that's possibly how you might expect it to be. But he did look in the second innings in particular like he was very comfortable in that side. And I actually think a key to this Ashes series is going to be the depth in fast bowlers, the management of fast bowlers, even though we've spent the great portion of this first part of the show talking about England's spinner. But just in terms of how this series goes, that's a huge part of it. We've already seen, Josh Hazlewood being ruled out of the World Test Championship. And seeing Josh Tongue come in as well with Jofra Archer also not being available. That the management, lots of them are saying no one's going to be able to bowl in every single test. So that, for me, is going to be a huge key. So Josh Tongue may have come in, got his opportunity at a really fortuitous time for himself and possibly for England.
Let's hear from David Warner. He announced he'll retire from Test cricket during the upcoming Australian summer. He's been talking to Isha Guha about his legacy in the sport. But first, of course, the Ashes this summer.
What does the Ashes mean to you?
Yeah, look, it means, it's the same old cliche, it means everything. As a kid, it's the pinnacle of Test cricket for us as Australians. Coming over here, we know how extremely difficult it is to win. Came very, very close last time. It was a great series. We've still got those memories of when JL made us watch back Stokesy and Leachy. We'll never forgive him, but I think, those moments there just want you to come back. I said in 2019 that I wouldn't come back here. After the Ashes last time here, I wouldn't come back. But I'm sitting here coming back with some redemption.
Take us back to 2019, that first Test match at Edgbaston. Your return from the ban. You've got 20,000 Brummies all saying personal things about you. What's going through your head in that moment?
Yeah, look, it's a tough one. I can play the other side and say, it's why do they have to be personal and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, they want to pay a ticket, come watch us and abuse us, and they think it's okay to do that. Then, fine by me. But I'll always play along. That's how I've always been. If they're going at me, I'm obviously doing something well. They're trying to put me off my game, and if they keep coming at me, that's fine. It doesn't bother me. I'll keep going out there. I've got the best seat in the house to watch the game, so all I can do is sit back, smile, and try and score runs.
How do you see your role, though, as this kind of pantomime villain, if you like? Is it something you thrive on?
Yeah, I do, and for me, it takes a lot of pressure off the other players. No other player gets to sort of, they're not sort of, how do you say it? I won't say a victim, but when you're out there and you do have that, sort of behind you, and you do hear it. But for me, when I walk out, I'm almost walking out there with a smile on my face because I know they're worried. So if they did it to probably every player, you know, what would happen then? You know, you just don't know how people would react. But for me, I'm thinking they've done it long enough to understand that I don't care. But I enjoy it. They have fun. They get a few beers in them and they have a laugh and go home and, yeah, had a good day out.
So the English fans like to get it stuck into you, Davey, but who is the real David Warner?
Married to a lovely lady and have 3 beautiful daughters. And, you know, for me, I'm a very family-orientated person. You know, I absolutely love them and adore them, but, you know, I'm actually genuinely a deep down caring person. So, you know, I reach out to anyone out there that wants to have a beer with me, and you get the opportunity to. You can sit down and we can talk cricket, we can talk anything, and I'm always up for it. What you see on the field is what you see. I think in my past, I've had those experiences where I've clashed with people on the field. I've made some mistakes in my time, but deep down, I think I'm a good person. And yeah, you know, I've enjoyed my career to date as well. So, you know, hopefully I've put some smiles on people's faces watching the game of cricket, and hopefully I can sort of, you know, leave that little bit of a legacy behind.
What's the weirdest thing an England player has ever said to you on the field?
I don't reckon there's been anything that really weird said. There's just a little bit of banter here and there, you know, when you're changing between overs and stuff, and that's probably years ago. It hasn't happened recent years. I think everyone knows certain players you probably don't go at when you're on the field, so I'm probably one of them. So I like that stuff, and if I have to get into it when I'm out there, I'll always stick up for you know, the player at the other end as well. If they're getting into them, you've always got to back up your teammates. So, you know, if you can take a bit of heat off them, you know you can cop it. So yeah, help them out.
Let's talk about your form with the bat. And you know, last time you were here, it was a difficult Ashes for you. You averaged 40 against Stuart Broad, in particular in Australia, but over here it's significantly different. Why is that? What is so different?
I think I've had coaches in the past, you know, try and tell me that you got to play more of a defensive sort of game over here, and I feel like last series when I was here, I was concentrating too much on surviving. My game plan's based on attacking and putting the bowlers off their line of lengths, and you know, I had success the series before that when I was over here. I think I scored 50 in every second innings, but I look back at those, and if you get good balls, you get good balls. You can't do anything about it. So I think the way that Broady bowled last time was great. I think, you know, for me, looking to be defensive early against him, and rightfully so, he bowled really well. I think if I'm looking to score and I'm in those positions, I actually can defend better. And that's just the way that I play. So if I'm looking to score, I defend better, try and put them off line and length. I think that approach will work for me coming this season. Something I've always I probably missed a little bit in 18 months prior, I think. Sort of not went into my shell, but I was looking more to survive rather than just play my natural game. So hopefully I can bring that out here in this first game of the Test Championship final.
What about that rivalry then with Stuart Broad? Just take us into your mind and your mindset. Edgbaston, first ball, facing up to Stuart Broad. What is going through your mind?
I think I missed 2 half volleys, and I tried to hit them straight down the ground. So, like, your mindset is just basically, you know, first up, you're hoping that they miss their line and length, and then they're going to have to adjust. So, from my perspective, it was, you know, it's just one of those things where you've got to try and get on the upper hand early. It gets me out of LBW, I don't review it, it's missing the stump. So they're things that you go back and you go, well, I've worked hard on trying to work out a game plan against their attack. And then you get out like that. And then there's conversations, oh, you know, why are you batting outside, sort of off and middle? Why are you batting out of your crease? Why are you doing this? And then you start second guessing yourself, going, well, is that the right approach? But the rivalry's great. I think in a recent interview, you know, he was talking about how, you know, bowling against me, he had to go back and like try and work out ways how to try and stop me scoring and stop the flow of scoring. For me, it's the same thing. How do I look to try and attack? How do I score off him? How do I put him off his line and length? I think in Australia, your margin of error is very small, where in England, the ball does swing in the air and does seam both ways. So I think with those 2018 Dukes, especially, they gripped they grip off the surface early on. So as an opening batter, if you manage to survive 10 to 15 overs, it'll get a lot easier with that seam because it was grippy. And I think, both sets of openers from both teams didn't have a great series. So from my perspective, I didn't look too much into it because I did get some good balls. But the rivalry in general has been fantastic. I've enjoyed it. He's a world-class bowler, world-class competitor, and he's a good bloke. And I think, sharing a beverage with those guys afterwards and just understanding how they go about their game as well. We're there because we love the game and we love the rivalry, but we all bring the best out of each other. And I think you don't have longevity in the game if you're not in that competitive spirit as well. So I think he always brings that, and I've got the ultimate respect for him.
It's quite amazing, really, two players coming to the end of their careers, and this will be your last time here in the UK. What do you want your legacy to be?
I think just remembered as a fighter, as a player who started his career playing 2020 cricket, not thinking I'd ever open the batting for Australia in Test cricket. Play all three forms. Hopefully I can inspire the next generation that, you've got hope of playing long form of the game if you just, start playing 2020 cricket. I think it's important that, you've got to pride yourself on your fitness and the way that you go about it. You have to train hard as a kid. I did a lot of that behind the scenes. Just want to be, sort of leave behind that competitive spirit, going out there and giving it my all, being the best teammate I can, and being the ultimate, competitor when I'm out there. Does
it feel quite emotional, with everything that you've been through in the game, your early beginnings through what you've achieved? You've got the second best strike rate for an opener for anyone that's played more than 35 Test matches. I mean, that's pretty outstanding. You've been involved in some incredible battles. You've won Ashes. How does that make you feel?
I think I'll be able to sit back and reflect on that when I finish. And when you hear those things, you don't actually realise that that's what you've done. I think we don't look at stats or anything like that, but when you sit back and like yourself, when you say things like that, you pinch yourself. I've been given a great opportunity. I've come through the system at the right time. We had a great generation before us. So just to put on the Australian baggy, or to put on the baggy green, in itself is a special moment. But I always look back and think back at that young kid that came through Housing Commission, grew up annoying all my next door neighbours with the balls banging on their walls. Even in my garage, I'd annoy my dad because if I missed one, I used to bang on the garage door as well. So, coming from Housing Commission, I worked at the local Woolworths, which is probably Tesco's, at 14 years of age. So playing cricket and, coming back and playing over a decade, it is really, really special. I don't just represent myself, I represent all my friends that wanted to achieve that as well. So they're always in the back of my mind that, kids growing up that I played with that wanted to aspire to play at this level. I'm always thinking of them and making sure that, what they've seen me be able to do has made them happy as well, because I've had a lot of good mates that played cricket that were exactly like me but went into different career paths. So I feel like I represent them in a way. And I'm just happy for my family as well.
Great interview with David Warner from Isha Guha. The full interview is on the latest TMS pod. How do Aussie cricket fans view him, Mel?
I guess you can't ignore Sandpapergate, and I think that has a big effect. I mean, you heard David Warner there say several times in that interview, he talks about the Housing Commission background, and he has that image as not a literal, but a figurative brawler, a real fighter, punchy kind of player who is, some people might have thought of as from the wrong side of the tracks, who didn't come through the system in the usual way and still managed to get to the top of Test cricket. And Australia, struggled to find an opening partner for him, something that I don't know Alistair can relate to as well after the retirement of Andrew Strauss. But it's had a lot of partners for Australia in that opening slot. But I think there are still fans who are divided in Australia because I still don't think we necessarily completely understand the long-term ramifications of Sandpaper Gate. I think Australian fans are quicker to turn on the Australian team when they see something they don't like. So in the aftermath of Justin Langer's exit from the Australian team, there was so much commentary and from fans and commentators alike about the Australian team being on the nose. I think that happens more quickly now than it did before Sandpaper Gate. So I do think that there are those who always will have that view and perhaps are a bit, have strong views about Dave Warner and the part he played in that. But he's been, brilliant opener for Australia. I don't think anyone could deny that.
He came across as very thoughtful there. He came across as magnanimous. He was full of praise for Stuart Broad and their battle, Alistair, and then, have a beer afterwards and so on and so forth. Is that the David Warner you recognise?
Not really, no. I have huge respect for David Warner because when I first started playing against him, he was the one who led the Australian charge in terms of making it uncomfortable to play against. I did enjoy. He said, he was definitely one of those players you wanted to leave alone and not talk to, but people just couldn't help themselves on our team. It was like he had said so much to them that we said, yeah, we'll just leave him alone. Don't say anything to him. And then after, you bat in for a bit and you after the end of the day, you say, you talking about it, and Warner was saying this and that. This is back in, when he was a bit younger, and then say, right, when he bats, we'll leave him alone. But then after like 20 minutes, you just couldn't help yourself. The whole like, so someone just had to say something, and that's where it kind of like it kicked on. Look, he was such a dangerous, certainly in Australia, such a dangerous batsman to bowl. He's the type of the captain, that aggressive opening batsman. There's so few of them to be able to do it because they only need half an hour, 40 minutes with to change the game, to set their platform up, and to do it like he did so consistently, was incredible. It'd be really interesting. That was a really interesting 10 minutes because a couple of things he said about the crowd didn't bother him, and you're not out of form, you're out of runs. Well, now we'll find out because the crowd's going to be on his case again in 10 days' time. It'll be I believe, just the same as it was. I mean, it was made better, I suppose, for the crowd that he couldn't buy a run last year, so last Ashes. So it kind of built more and more momentum. He said it didn't bother him, but it'd be really interesting to see whether that's true because the lack of runs he scored. I mean, I don't know what part of that that was that played in it, because that must have been incredibly daunting. We know what it's like as English players going to Brisbane, for example, where the Aussies certainly pay their money and they certainly feel entitled to call an Englishman whatever they fancy throughout those 5 days. So that'll be on, and how he can cope with what he's about to experience with hopefully Stuart Broad plays that battle, because that'll be on his mind will be in his mind, has been on his mind, because I know as an opening batsman, when someone's got the wood on you and you've got to go and face him, it's so hard to come through.
And the amazing thing about that is Stuart Broad's already done all these interviews where he's looked back on 2019 and said when Dave Warner asked him at Lord's, did you mean to get the ball to nip back up the slope? And he said to him, yeah, and actually had no way which way it was going to go. It's like, why have you told him that now, Stuart? Why didn't you wait till he retires, for goodness sake? But it's been a huge talking point in Australia, his average, 10 from last time around, and the fact that Stuart Broad got him 7 times out of 10, that it was around the wicket, and there are going to be a lot of eyes on this World Test Championship to see if someone like Shami comes in, bowls around the wicket to Warner, if he goes cheaply twice. He's telegraphed his exit plan quite publicly now. We know that doesn't always work, and it's quite rare that a player does map out his exit plan publicly like that. And in saying that, he knows it might not happen, but it's I don't know. It's just very interesting that he's laid his stall out there. It may not go that way, but that makes a World Test Championship, I think, quite interesting, because I think that will just, they've not been quite so forward in saying he's definitely going to be there all the way through the Ashes, the Australian selectors.
We'll come on to the World Test Championship in just a moment. The other thing he said about the battle with Broad last time, Alistair, he said he got some good balls, right? But he also talked about the ball itself in that series. I thought the other interesting thing, the line he said was, I was just concentrating on surviving rather than scoring. Does that ring true?
Well, I think when you haven't scored any runs and you've got to face a guy, who's got the wood over you, and, you're averaging less than 10, the only other option would have then been to play some massive shots. The tough thing about, Stuart Broad coming around the wicket, he's one of the best bowlers at left-handers coming around the wicket. So Mohammad Shami might come around the wicket to David Warner and not be as effective, because Stuart Broad has that ability. As David Warner said, well, I was LBW, then I nicked off, I then went a little bit off to offside, then I stayed leg side. So whichever way he tried to combat it, it just brought the other one in, because I think he was LBW to start with, and they were saying, why were you batting on middle and off? And that's because he's trying to cover the ball which Stuart can get from his wide angle, which is thrown at the stumps and then just straighten just enough. So David was trying to cover that, but Broadie's also got the other ball which does nip the other way. So then he started getting LBW. So basically, Stuart was just always one step ahead of David Warner. The next step would have been for Warner would say, well, I can't survive defending the first 20 balls, so I'm going to go and play really attackingly. Of course, that's what he's going to do now. Now, if he nicks the second or third ball with a big booming cover drive to third slip, which obviously is all England fans would want, then it becomes a different story. If say, for example, a nick flies over third slip and he gets a couple away, he will then feel so much better about himself. That's why in my opinion, I think Stuart Broad almost has to play
that was my next question. That was my next, because I've heard so much, partly because the cricket wasn't, well, it was on the Saturday, but a lot of this Test match wasn't as competitive maybe as people would have liked. There was so much discussion on what the bowling attack at Edgbaston would be. You feel he has to play that first Test, Alistair Broad? Stuart
Broad is a big game player. That first Ashes, the first Devon Ashes at Edgbaston, the crowd will be up there. He will be so ready for that. Yes, like the second innings at Ireland was typical Stuart Broad. The game was done. He got his 5 from the first innings. I could almost told you like he wouldn't have taken many wickets there, because he when the game's almost done, or it doesn't mean as much. I know you shouldn't say that when you're playing for England. He's not the bowler. He can be, but however, when the moment's on, he is outstanding. And I think that's such a big battle that England need to win. David Warner, though, he's only averaged 25 for the last 18 Test matches or so. He's certainly on his, he's certainly coming to the last bit of his career, as he said. But because he is so dangerous, because he is almost a Bazball kind of player, he can change a game so quickly. I would pick Stuart Broad for that.
Do you think Australia would... if he doesn't play, that's a boost for Australia, isn't it, Mel?
If Broad doesn't play, possibly. I mean, look, England have got some really great choices, I think. But I agree with Alistair. It's like if you've got that psychological blow there waiting, I can't think of a more obvious matchup in Test cricket where someone comes into bat, just in recent years, when you just went, right, okay, we know it's going to happen now.
Yeah.
And that was all the way through that Ashes series. It's going to be Stuart Broad coming around the wicket. And you knew what was going to happen. So it must be very tempting when you know that there is that clear psychological, just, you don't want to say just to try it, because it's a big thing just to try something, but I don't think you'd ever just be trying Stuart Broad in a Test match, would you? Well, he's a bit better than just trying.
I couldn't agree more. And also, remember last Ashes series in Australia, England had it all planned out that they don't need Stuart Broad at Brisbane or James Anderson at Brisbane. They'll wait for it to swing in Adelaide, and suddenly you're 1-0 down. got hammered, and it's different. I'm not saying that it's the same thing, but I think this England side won't fall into that trap. And I just think it's too bigger game, and you want your big players who have proven time and time again that when it matters, I don't think there's ever been an England player who's made more of a difference in certain spells than Stuart Broad. So that's why I would play him.
Alistair Cook and Mel Farrell are with us this evening on 5 Live Cricket. The Ashes start on June the 16th. We'll be across it on 5 Live and on Sports Extra. But as Mel's been saying, Australia are in the World Test Championship, first of all, against India. And that gets underway on Wednesday. Ball-by-ball commentary on Sports Extra from 10:15. Former Indian wicketkeeper Deep Dasgupta, part of the TMS team, and is with us now. Evening, Deep.
Good evening.
How do India approach this? What will be the makeup of their team this week?
Quite interesting, actually. I mean, I was hearing you guys talking about Australia and their preparation for the Ashes and WTC. Two teams coming from very different kind of a background in terms of prep work. India coming from obviously 2 months of IPL, all these guys playing for different franchises, and then finally coming together and playing obviously T20 cricket. From there to Test match cricket, that to the WTC finals. I think that's the biggest challenge. How do you move from that T20 mentality and mindset to Test match cricket? While obviously Australia, some of them have been playing here, like Labuschagne and Steve Smith and Nasser and all. But their challenge would be a little different. Maybe undercooked a little bit.
Well, I'll come on to the undercooked against overcooked very shortly because Pat Cummins has been talking about the comparison of being undercooked or overcooked. Yeah. Do you think in this modern era now, going from one format to another so quickly is as big a deal as maybe it was?
Yes and no. So for me, I think it depends on individuals. For example, the younger generation, or maybe cricketers of like the younger lot, they've grown up on a staple diet of white ball cricket. So it's definitely challenging. There's absolutely no two ways about it. But comparatively, it'd be easier for someone, let's say a Shubman Gill, as compared to a Virat, who's kind of grown up playing red ball cricket, and they've kind of been able to change their game according to the shortest format. So I think it would be based on an individual, how they look at it, how their game is. In fact, I still remember I was having a chat with Virat during IPL, and one of the hundreds that he got, and I was talking to him about his strike rate, because there was a little bit of criticism during this IPL regarding his strike rate and all. And one of the things that he mentioned, and was very interesting, he said, I play all three formats, so I've got to be careful. I can't be moving from one format to the other and changing my game completely. And I thought that was very, very interesting what he said to me post-match.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well that you mentioned Shubman Gill, because I mean, he's going a slightly different way, as you say. He said, you get a bit of confidence from the IPL, and that's the fun thing about it. Last week we were playing something completely different, with a different atmosphere, and that's the challenge, and that's what's exciting about Test cricket.
That is, and to be fair, I mean, Shubman's, he's had a fair bit of experience playing international cricket now, and also overseas. I mean, he's played quite a few games for India a couple of years ago, or rather a few years ago, and he was kind of successful playing against New Zealand in New Zealand. So he's got experience of these conditions and all. And listen, last year or so, he's been absolutely magnificent across all three formats. He's got hundreds. He's got a double hundred in a 50-over game. He's got hundreds in T20 Test match cricket. So I think just that confidence, and we keep talking about how important confidence is as far as a player is concerned. So he's going to come into this WTC fans with a lot of runs behind him across all formats.
The overcooked or undercooked, Mel. but this is I do without sounding old. This is this generation, isn't it? I mean, Pat Cummins has said, look, it doesn't. As a bowler, I feel it doesn't take too much to kind of get ready, and then I want to make sure I'm fresh physically for the matches. I mean, England have been something similar when talking about players getting time in the middle during this Island Test. It's like they feel that they're ready when they're needed.
Well, they do. And look, there was a lot of criticism when Australia didn't play any warm-up matches before the Border Gavaskar Trophy series in India, and they got absolutely rolled in the first test, and that kind of heightened that. So we've actually got this weird situation where this World Test Championship feels to me, and I hate saying this, it's got this dual role as the World Test Championship final, but it also feels like it's almost Australia's warm-up test for the Ashes, and I'm sure India fans would hate to hear that, and many people would hate to hear that, but that's just the way it's worked out. You can't afford to go into a period of 6 tests in 7 weeks overcooked. Though that's what I would say. You can't afford to do that. That's really hard. And a lot of them have had basically all of April off, freshened up both for mind and body. That's how they feel it is. Maybe there will be a little bit rusty when they go out the Oval. Who knows? Modern players are definitely more primed to be able to do that. But I think also we've seen in the past what can happen when teams are undercooked. So I think Australia will be quite happy to go to Edgbaston having played one test. But I don't want to see that devalue the World Test Championship final either.
Can I just quickly add to that? I guess, comparatively, it'll be easier for the bowlers because obviously as a bowler you've got more opportunities to get your rhythm back in terms of you can bowl the first spell. If you don't feel that good with your rhythm in the first spell, you've got a second spell to fall back on. But for the batters, I guess that becomes a little more challenging then. There are no second takes for the batter.
Yeah. Always easier for the bowlers, Alistair, isn't it?
Couldn't agree more. There's 6 chances every over to get them out.